All right, folks, welcome back. Here we go with arrays. Now, we're going to go through a bit of a crash course in the video here on arrays, and then you're going to need to go onto the College Board Unit 6, and you're going to need to go through some of that stuff for the little pieces and fill in some gaps, because video could be 3 hours long if I let it. So I'm going to keep it short. I'm going to go through the key points on arrays, get you rolling. So first off, what is an array? An array is a variable, so it gets a single variable name, just like any other variable name, integer, string, whatever. But that variable can contain multiple pieces of data of that variable type. So you can have a string array that has a whole bunch of different strings stored in it. You can have an integer array that has a whole bunch of numbers stored in it, and so on. But the beauty is that they can be referenced, the individual elements inside of an array can be referenced using the one variable name and then an index. And that allows loops to get through all of the variables, all of the values inside of that box. So this is called a data structure. So if you've done Python before, you've seen lists. Very similar idea, a little bit more crude and old school. Arrays in Java have been around a long time, since like the C++ days. And so they're certainly not like modern class data structures like array lists or like lists. But they're really, really important, and they're in a lot of old school code bases all over the world. So we need to know how they work. So a couple of big important pieces about arrays. We're going to talk about declaring them. We're going to talk about initializing them, not just the syntax, but what's happening in the background. And then we also need to understand a little bit about memory and memory allocations. Arrays require you to state the size of the array at the time that you declare it. And this means that you don't get to change that later on. So it's reserving that block of memory for you to stick values in as you go through and use the array. So there's likely going to be this kind of empty cushion at the end of your array, and we need to account for that as programmers. But then also we need to think about, well, how much memory do I really want to steal for this array when I don't necessarily know how big it's going to be? It's not a dynamically growing thing. If I decide I need more space, I suddenly need to copy this to a whole new array that takes a bigger memory block. And it's an involved process. So there's definitely some thought there in terms of size of the array and dealing with blank space at the end while it's filling up, but then also trying to not steal too much memory initially. So there's that little piece in there. So array uses box notation, so like box brackets. Here's an example of a string array being declared only. All right, so this is declare only, which means we've created the array, but we've not assigned any value to any of the individual elements in it. We've simply told Java that I have an array called names, which is going to hold string variables, and it's going to have 10 boxes. So it's going to have 10 places inside of it to hold strings. Now those indexes are going to be from 0 to 9, just like when we did string indexing. Okay, but we just declared it. No value, just declared it. So right now every one of those boxes would be null because strings are object. Now I can also do a declare and initialize with literal values. So here I have a private integer array, notice the box notation, called nums, and I'm using squiggly brackets to literally declare the values in the data set to 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, which is Fibonacci number sequence. So this is going to assign those values, and based on the literal values, will dictate the size of the array. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This array is an integer array of size 8, and these values have already been slotted into it. All right, so a couple of different ways. Now you can initialize an array later on. So in my constructor here, I could initialize my names array. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this. You can go one box at a time is typically the way. So names box 0 equals, and then I can give it a name. So I'll just fill these all in for you. So here we go, Maria, Ron, John, Adam, and so on, right? So I filled in all of my names here. It's looking a little too masculine heavy. Let's change it up a little bit. Here we go. So we throw some names in there. Now again, box 0 up to box 9. That's beginning to the end of this array. And then I'm assigning strings to each of those boxes. So inside of it, once those values are in the array, now we can access them. A couple of things we're going to do in here. Now notice that this is just my constructor. So inside here, I'll use my object, my AP object. So a couple of things that we need to be able to do. We need to be able to mutate elements, which we've already seen. So I could do something like nums box 4 is now equal to negative 100, for example, right? So that's going to say nums box 4 is now equal to negative 100. Now it doesn't like it because I I need to use my object to reference it, and my object is just going to be referencing this is not a static variable. So I'm going to want to either make it static or start messing around in a method. So I'm just going to write a really simple method, public void do stuff, and I'll mess around in here. So we'll do nums box4 equals -100. And then in my main method, I'll just call ap.doStuff, just so I'm following that object-oriented style. So here's where I can kind of mess around with this. So we should be able to assign value. We should also know how to loop through an array. So for example, we can do a for int I equals 0, I less than. Now arrays have a dot length, just like strings, but arrays dot length doesn't have brackets because it's a private variable. It's a field variable. It's not a method. So nums.length, just like that, I++. That's going to let me loop through my array. And then I can do something like system.out.print nums box I plus space and like a vertical line or something like that. So this will loop through my nums array, printing out the value as it goes. So if I run that code there, we'll see 1, 1, 2, 3, -100, 8, 13, 21. Okay, so we should be able to loop through. We should also be able to do something like swapping values. So for example, if I wanted to swap the first and last, or the first and second names in my names list, so I could do like string temp equals names box 0. Then I would do names box 0 equals names box 1. And then names box 1 equals temp. And this might seem ridiculous. That's a lot of work. But remember, as soon as I go names box 0 equals names box 1, that line right there, what previously was held in name 0 is now gone from memory. So if I haven't backed it up somewhere, I can't then go grab it later to throw it into names box 1, right? So we need to be able to have that. So let's steal this for loop here and let's reuse it for names. And we'll just print out the names after I've done the swap. So you see Ron and Maria's position have switched. And there we have the loop printing through. We can also print through with for each loops as well. So we can also do this with a for each loop. So we could do like for string e in names, system.out.print e plus our little line. Now this is great and it's super clean, easy to do when we're looping through. The only issue here, there's two issues. One, we cannot modify values in the array during a for each loop. Can't do it. And second, we do not have access to the index unless we've created our own manual iterating integer to know what index we're at. So we have no power over the index, only the element. So we can see the value that's at that spot in the loop through the array, but we cannot modify what's stored in the array, nor can we access the index. So the for each loops are great, but they have their place. We need to know what that is. So the last thing I'm going to mention about arrays is that they are what is called passed by reference. So what that means is that if I had another method, public void destroy array, and it takes an integer array x, and all it's going to do is for int I equals 0, I less than x.length, I plus plus, x box I is now 0. So it's going to destroy the array, which means it's going to reset all of its values to 0. Now this is what's really interesting because everything we've done to this point, if we passed it to a method, it created a copy inside of that method for a local variable to manipulate, and then it either returned or didn't return values back to where the method was called. But if I call destroy, I can't spell here, if I call destroy array and I pass it nums, okay, and now we've already done this, but let's just print nums after we're done. Num, and this will be an int. So for each int element in nums, I'm going to print it out. Now, I'm going to do this after I destroy the nums array. what should happen in the way that we traditionally understand variables is when this nums gets passed here, it's actually creating a temporary copy of the array, which it's turning that temporary copy all to zeros, and then jumping back here, and nums should remain untouched and intact. But that's not what happens. Instead, what happens with arrays is when I call, what happens with arrays is when I call this method and I pass it nums, it actually passes a memory reference to the array nums. So here, when I'm working with this integer array x, I'm actually modifying the real memory locations for nums. And so I'm modifying the variables in that greater field variable or that field array of nums, not a temporary local variable. So you can destroy stuff from where you called the method, which is different than what we've done before. So just be aware of that. It's very different and it's tricky. All right, so that's the core concepts behind arrays. You're starting to see it's finicky. There's the dot length, there's the indexing. So like the last value in an array is going to be dot length minus 1. So like nums dot length minus 1 is going to be the index for that last element. So there's a bit of that trickery going on. So let's look at some of the stuff I want you to try to do. Now again, you might have to go to the College Board here to get a little bit deeper knowledge of some of this. All right, so here's some methods I want you to try to add in to the functionality of this program. So an increment nums, which is going to take each element in the nums array and add 1 to it. I want you to do a double strings, which will take each element in the names array and double it. So if the name was Adam, it'd be Adam, Adam. I want you to do a print array, which just prints it using a regular for loop. Let's do a pick winner, where you use randoms, and it'll randomly pick somebody from the names array to be the winner, and just print it out. How about printing the array backwards? Let's write a method that prints an array backwards. Pick one, nums or names, doesn't matter. All right, shortest string. So take the names array, and I want you to print me the shortest string in that array. If there's 2 of the same length, just take the first one. Okay, shortest string 2, do it again, but use a for each loop this time. Sort the array. Now, you don't have to do this right now. We're going to get into algorithms later about searching and sorting, but play around with it. At least think about it. Like the nums array in particular, how would you sort it in ascending order from smallest to biggest? It's a little bit weird. There's some funky stuff you can do too where you can bring out the arrays class, but I'm not going to get there right now. Look into it if you want. Make a copy of the array. So create a second array of the same size, copy everything into it. Print strings that have a length of bigger than 4 only. So instead of printing the whole array, just print me the ones that have a length bigger than 4. And then display an array with the for each loop. So just a print, but this time use the for each. And then rotate the array to the right. So let's use the nums array. Actually, doesn't matter. Use nums or names, whatever you want. And I want you to shift everything by 1 position to the right. Okay, that's a neat little one for you to do. So I want you to try all these. And then I'm going to get you to actually send me your code when you're done. Kind of just, you can call this array practice, is what I called mine. Send me that code, and I want to have a look at it working. And again, you might need to hop on the College Board, watch some of those videos to get a little bit deeper understanding, but that should kind of get you going with it. All right, good luck. Look forward to reading the code. Have a good one.